A scaffold stands in the town square of Saint-Denis, on a volcanic island in the Indian Ocean, 9,000 miles from Paris. The year is 1730. The crowd is mostly French colonists, planters, merchants, soldiers of the Compagnie des Indes. A few enslaved workers watch from behind the line of guards. The tropical sun is high and hard. The man on the scaffold is in his early 40s, Olivier Levasseur, known to the navies of France, Portugal, and England as La Bouse, the buzzard, for the speed and precision of his attacks. He has been a privateer, a pirate, a fugitive, and briefly, a pardoned citizen. Today, he is a condemned man. He has been convicted of piracy by the French colonial authorities. The sentence is death by hanging. But Levasseur does not die quietly. According to the account that has echoed through 3 centuries, he reaches into his shirt and pulls out a piece of paper, or perhaps a necklace bearing a coded message. He holds it up so the crowd can see it. Then he throws it. Cherchez mon trésor. Le qui pourra. Find my treasure. He who can. The rope takes him. The paper falls. And with that single gesture, Olivier Levasseur transforms himself from a dead pirate into an eternal mystery. That piece of paper, if it existed, has never been conclusively decoded. The treasure it supposedly leads to has never been found. And for nearly 300 years, treasure hunters, cryptographers, and dreamers have tried. This is the true story of the man behind the legend, and the question of whether the legend has any truth in it at all. To understand Levasseur, you need to understand why the Indian Ocean in the early 1700s was the richest hunting ground on Earth. By the late 17th century, European pirates had begun to realize something. The Caribbean, the traditional theater of piracy, was getting crowded. The Spanish treasure fleets were better protected. The Royal Navy was expanding its patrols. The easy pickings were drying up, but half a world away, a different story was unfolding. The Indian Ocean was the crossroads of the richest trade networks on the planet. Portuguese carracks carried gold, diamonds, silk, and spices between Goa, Macau, and Lisbon. Mughal merchant vessels, some carrying the personal wealth of Indian princes, sailed between Surat and the Red Sea. The Dutch East India Company ran heavily laden Indiamen between Batavia and Amsterdam. The English East India Company did the same from Madras and Bombay, and all of it funneled through predictable choke points. The Mozambique Channel, the Straits of Malacca, the approaches to the Red Sea. A single well-placed warship could intercept fortunes. The route that connected Atlantic piracy to this Indian Ocean bonanza was called the Pirate Round. It ran south from the Caribbean or the American colonies, around the Cape of Good Hope, and up into the western Indian Ocean, to Madagascar, the Comoros, the Mascarene Islands. Madagascar, in particular, became the great pirate haven of the East, uncolonized, ungoverned, rich in fresh water and provisions, and positioned perfectly to strike at the shipping lanes. It was into this world that Olivier Levasseur sailed, first as a privateer in the service of France, then as a pirate who answered to no crown at all. Olivier Levasseur was born around 1688 to 1690 in Calais, France, a port city with a long tradition of seamanship, smuggling, and privateering. The details of his early life are sparse. What is known is that he was educated, literate, and trained as a navigator, skills that set him apart from many of his contemporaries in the pirate world. During the War of the Spanish Succession, the same conflict that produced so many pirates of the Golden Age, Levasseur received a letter of marque from the French crown, authorizing him to attack English and Dutch shipping. He operated as a privateer in the Atlantic, probably out of Martinique or Saint-Domingue, and by all accounts he was effective. His nickname, La Bouse, the buzzard, came from the speed with which he swooped on his prey. When the Treaty of Utrecht ended the war in 1713, Levasseur faced the same choice that confronted thousands of other privateers: go home to poverty or keep raiding without a commission. He chose piracy. For several years, Levasseur operated in the Caribbean and along the West African coast, sometimes in company with other well-known pirates. Historical records place him alongside Benjamin Hornigold, Samuel Bellamy, and Edward England at various points, though the exact chronology is debated, and some of these associations may reflect the tendency of later chroniclers to connect famous names. By around 1719 or 1720, Levasseur had made the transition that defined his career. He sailed east, around the Cape, and into the Indian Ocean. It was here that he partnered with the English pirate John Taylor, a capable and ruthless captain about whom surprisingly little is recorded. Together, Levasseur and Taylor would pull off one of the single largest heists in the entire history of piracy. In April of 1721, Levasseur and Taylor were cruising the waters near the Mascarene Islands, the volcanic archipelago that includes modern Mauritius and Réunion, when they received intelligence that a Portuguese vessel of extraordinary value was nearby. The ship was the Nossa Senhora do Cabo, also recorded in some sources as the Virgem do Cabo, a large Portuguese East Indiaman. She was not just any merchantman, she was carrying the retiring viceroy of Portuguese India, Dom Luís Carlos Inácio Xavier de Meneses, the 5th Count of Ericeira, on his return voyage to Lisbon. Some accounts also place the retiring Archbishop of Goa aboard. More importantly, the Nossa Senhora do Cabo was carrying treasure. The specifics vary by source, but the cargo reportedly included gold and silver bars, coffers of diamonds, bolts of Chinese silk, crates of porcelain, religious vestments embroidered with gold thread, and, most famously, the fiery cross of Goa. This was a large processional cross from the churches of Old Goa, said to be made of solid gold and encrusted with diamonds, rubies, and emeralds. By some accounts, it was so heavy that it required 3 men to lift it. By others, it was merely very large and very valuable. Either way, it was a prize of staggering worth. The total value of the cargo has been estimated at anywhere from £100,000 to £800,000 sterling. In 1721 money. To put that in perspective, a Royal Navy captain's annual salary was roughly £200. Even the conservative estimate represents a fortune almost beyond comprehension. And fortune, in the old sense of the word, meaning fate, had already intervened on the pirates' behalf. The Nossa Senhora do Cabo had been caught in a violent tropical storm in the Indian Ocean. She had lost her mainmast, her rudder was damaged. She had limped into the harbour at Saint-Denis on the Île Bourbon, modern Réunion, for emergency repairs. Most of her 72 guns had been stowed below decks or lashed in place to stabilise the ship during the storm, and they had not been remounted. When Levasseur and Taylor found her, the Nossa Senhora do Cabo was essentially a floating treasure chest with no lock on it. The attack, according to most accounts, was swift and almost bloodless. The Portuguese crew, unable to fight, surrendered. The pirates boarded and spent days, possibly weeks, stripping the ship of everything valuable. The fiery cross of Goa, the diamonds, the gold, the silk, all of it was loaded onto the pirates' vessels. It was, by any measure, one of the greatest single prizes ever taken at sea. What happened after the raid is less clear, and this is where the treasure legend begins to either gain traction or fall apart, depending on what you believe. Levasseur and Taylor divided the spoils. The exact terms of the division are unknown. Taylor appears to have taken his share and eventually negotiated a pardon from the Spanish authorities in Panama, disappearing from the historical record as a free and presumably wealthy man. Some historians believe Taylor simply spent his fortune and lived out his life in quiet obscurity. Levasseur's path was different. After the Nossa Senhora do Cabo raid, Levasseur continued to operate in the Indian Ocean for several years, though the details become increasingly fragmentary. He may have spent time on Madagascar. He appears to have attempted to negotiate a pardon from the French authorities, not an unusual move for pirates of this era, who often tried to buy their way back into legitimacy with a share of their plunder. The French colonial government on Bourbon, Réunion, did you in fact offer amnesties to pirates during this period, hoping to settle them as colonists? Several former pirates took the deal. Levasseur may have been among them. Some sources suggest he lived quietly on the island for a period, possibly under an assumed identity. But the pardon, if it was granted, did not hold. By 1730, the French authorities on Bourbon had arrested Levasseur. The exact circumstances of his capture are unclear. Some accounts say he was betrayed by an associate. Others suggest that the colonial governor, under pressure from the Portuguese crown, which had never stopped demanding justice for the Nossa Senhora do Cabo, decided to revoke his amnesty and bring him to trial. The trial was brief. The verdict was guilty. And on July 7, 1730, Olivier Levasseur was hanged at Saint-Denis. Now comes the part everyone remembers, and the part that deserves the most scrutiny. The story of Levasseur's last words and the throne cryptogram is one of the most famous anecdotes in pirate history. But how much of it is true? Let us start with what can be reasonably verified. First, Levasseur was executed. That is documented in French colonial records. The date and place, July 7, 1730, Saint-Denis, Bourbon, are consistent across multiple sources. Second, the Nossa Senhora do Cabo raid happened. It is documented in Portuguese, French, and English records. The scale of the treasure is corroborated by multiple independent accounts, though the specific figures vary. Third, not all of the treasure was accounted for after Levasseur's arrest. Whether this means he hid it, spent it, lost it, or divided it in ways that went unrecorded is unknown. Now, the problematic part, the story of the throne cryptogram and the defiant last words, "Find my treasure, he who can," does not appear in any known contemporary account of the execution. The earliest versions of this story date from significantly later, and the provenance of the cryptogram itself is murky. The document that is commonly presented as Levasseur's cryptogram is a sheet containing 17 lines of symbols, a mix of Greek letters, Masonic-style marks, and other characters that do not correspond to any standard cipher of the period. Various treasure hunters and amateur cryptographers have claimed partial or complete decipherments over the years, but none has led to the recovery of any treasure, and none has been independently verified by professional cryptanalysts. There is a further problem. Even if Levasseur did hide treasure, the logistics are doubtful. The Nossa Senhora do Cabo's cargo included massive quantities of gold bars, heavy religious artifacts, and thousands of loose gems. Hiding such a volume of material would have required significant effort, time, and secrecy. On an island or coastline where other pirates, local populations, and colonial authorities were all present, it is far more likely that the treasure was divided among the crew, spent incrementally over the following years, and gradually dispersed into the economies of Madagascar, the Mascarenes, and the Indian Ocean trade networks. The romance of the hidden treasure, in other words, may be exactly that, romance, but maybe is not, is. And that ambiguity is what has kept the legend alive. The most sustained search for Levasseur's treasure has taken place at Belle Ombre, on the northern coast of the island of Mahé in the Seychelles. In 1949, an Englishman named Reginald Cruise Wilkins arrived in the Seychelles and became convinced that Levasseur's treasure was buried at Belle Ombre. He spent the remaining 28 years of his life and much of his fortune excavating the site. He found fragments of 17th and 18th century artifacts, including what he claimed were parts of old coffers and navigational instruments. But he never found the main treasure. His son, John Cruise Wilkins, continued the search after his father's death. As of the most recent reports, the excavation at Belle Ombre has continued for over 7 decades, making it one of the longest-running treasure hunts in history. Some chambers and tunnels have been uncovered, along with scattered artifacts, but no cache of gold, no fiery cross of Goa, no diamonds. The site itself presents its own questions. Is it a pirate cache, a colonial-era construction, a natural geological formation interpreted through the lens of treasure hunting optimism? Without independent archaeological verification, the answer remains uncertain. Other treasure hunters have searched in Madagascar, on Réunion itself, and along the coast of East Africa. None has produced verifiable results. The idea of a pirate leaving behind a coded map to buried treasure is one of the most enduring tropes in Western popular culture, and Levasseur's story is one of its real-world anchors. Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, published in 1883, cemented the treasure map as a central icon of the pirate myth. But Stevenson's map is fiction. Most historical pirates did not bury their treasure, they spent it. The economics of piracy did not encourage long-term savings plans. Levasseur's cryptogram, whether authentic or not, sits at the intersection of history and myth in a way that few artifacts do. It is tangible. You can look at reproductions of it. It is unsolved. No one has cracked it to everyone's satisfaction. And it is attached to a verified historical event, the Nossa Senhora do Cabo raid, that really did involve treasure of almost incomprehensible value. That combination, a real fortune, a real pirate, and an unsolved code, has made Levasseur a recurring figure in treasure hunting media, escape room narratives, and adventure fiction. The Assassin's Creed video game franchise, which frequently draws on real pirate history, includes Levasseur as a character. The cryptogram itself has appeared in puzzle books and cryptography courses as an example of an unsolved historical cipher. Whether the cipher is genuine or a later fabrication, its cultural power is real. It speaks to something deep in the human imagination, the idea that somewhere, waiting to be found, there is a fortune that belongs to whoever is clever enough to decode the clue. Here is what we know for certain. Olivier Levasseur was a real man. He was born in Calais. He sailed as a privateer, then as a pirate. He helped capture one of the richest prizes in maritime history. He was hanged on a volcanic island in the Indian Ocean on a July morning in 1730. Everything else, the cryptogram, the deathbed challenge, the treasure still waiting in a cave on some tropical shore, lives in the space between the historical record and the human need to believe that the story is not over. And perhaps that is the real treasure Levasseur left behind. Not gold, not diamonds, not even the fiery cross of Goa, which, if it survived, is sitting in someone's collection or was melted down centuries ago. What he left behind was the question. There is something profoundly human about a man on the gallows who refuses to let his death be the end of the story. Whether the cryptogram was real or invented, whether the treasure exists or was spent long ago, the gesture itself, a condemned man throwing a challenge to the crowd, is an act of defiance that outlasts the rope, the scaffold, and the empire that built them. 300 years later, people are still looking. That may be the point.